Alright, with the damp surface techniques, you're going to need to put clean water on the circles before you do anything. So I'm going to do 2 circles at a time, just put damp, clean water. So you're going to want clean water for this. So you probably need to get up occasionally and get fresh, clean water. So I'm just putting clean water over the entire surface. You also want to make sure that the brush is cleaned out before you do it, so that you don't get any color on the paper. Alright, take a little more water, and I'm going to do the second one. I'm going to let that sit for a minute. Maybe I'll do a third circle here, because I don't want it to be too wet. I'll do a third one over here. Alright, while those are drying, or drying slightly, I'm going to do the bruising. And bruising the paper happens when you press into the paper to create an indentation. Alright, so with a stylus we're going to use this. It causes the pigment in a damp surface wash to gather into dark areas. So I could recreate this wood grain shape if I wanted to. Alright, so I'll let that sit for now. I'm going to come back up here to the round and flat brush strokes on a damp paper. So round and flat, any 2 brushes here. So the paper's damp. Take a little bit of water on my brush. I'm going to get some paint. And what ends up happening is you can see along the edges there, as this is happening with the damp surface, the water is starting to kind of blend out from the edge. It's softening the edge. So it's not as crisp as it was on the other ones that we did. Alright, you can see how with a little bit of pigment, you get a little bit more here. How the soft edge is becoming a little bit more fluid. It's not as hard-edged as the other one. It's just creating that soft edge where the water was on that damp surface. Alright. Now I'm noticing, since I did the clean water a couple minutes ago, that it's still a little bit too dry. It's getting a little bit too dry. So I'm just going to put some more clean water. I've got a second area, I've got a second cup of clean water to do the next one, which is the varied washes on a damp surface. Alright, so over here, when I do the varied washes on the damp surface, just get a couple different colors here. And since the paper's wet, you can see how the edges now just come in a little bit softer. Everything gets softer. Just took a little more water in there. I want to get that rich light blue color, so I'll get a little more paint there. That richer dark color. See, I'm overlapping there. And it's just creating a darker wash of that color. Now, next technique. Stroking the edge of a damp wash with a clean, moist brush produces a gradated blend, which is right here. So with this, get some clean water in there again, because it's been a little while. Just dampen it up a little bit. Now when I go in with color, I'm going to get a lot of color to this side to make it a little bit darker, and then transition it over. So you can see it's really dark. And I'm going to fill most of that circle with that dark color. And since the paper itself is damp, it'll allow me to lift. So I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to clean it, take a little bit of the water off, and now I'm going to pull and lift. So I clean my brush again and pull, basically lifting some of that color out of that area. It creates a gradated tone, so from dark to light as I work my way across. Get a little more water here. I can lift some of this out. It's almost like erasing. So since the paper's wet, it'll allow me to lift that color up and make a nice smooth transition in my gradated tone. Alright, now where I've got the bruising technique here, I've already got the indentations in the paper. I'm going to pick up a color. I like that wood grain, so I'm going to go with the brown again. Use a bigger brush because I'm covering the entire area. I'm just going to paint it in. And you can see immediately where I have those indentations in the paper, the pigment is falling into those areas where I bruised the paper, and when it dries, it absorbs more of the pigment down in that area. And I can see the texture visibly. Now the scraping. Scraping through a near dry wash with a blunt tool. I made some popsicle sticks with an edge, flat edge. So I'm going to get a good amount of paint on my brush again. Fill that. Again, the surface is damp. So I put clean water down first. Fill that. Now while it's still wet, I'm going to take the tool, scrape, kind of lifting, a little bit of pressure, lifting some of the pigment out. Kind of moving it around to create that little pops of white showing through. Alright, the next three here, white area protected from a damp surface wash with masking tape. Alright, white design area masked with liquid frisket, and then the liquid frisket applied over a dry wash. So I'm going to do that first. And what we're using for liquid frisket is rubber cement. So I've got some rubber cement here. So clean some of it off of the brush. Then we're going to take the brush, and on this one, I'm just going to put some random blobs of color with the brush, just kind of dabbing in some of that rubber cement in a variety of ways. What happens is, once that's totally dry, I can paint over it. Once the paint is dry, I can rub it off. So this one I need a dry wash, so I'm going to do that one next. Kind of see those feet like trails here. So I'm going to put a dry wash down. It's got a light yellow color, so I'm going to use some of the yellow here. Oh, I made mud. That's kind of cool. I got to let this dry before I do anything, because it says over a dry, followed with a darker, damp surface wash. So I got to put that dry wash in first and let it totally and completely dry. Now, let that set up for a minute. I'm going to do the masking. right here. So if I needed to get an edge, a separation that's really, really sharp, the white area is protected from the damp surface wash with masking tape. So I'm just going to take off a piece of masking tape, stick it down. I'm going to mix up that brownish yellow. I've got to put a damp wash down first. So I'm going to take the brush and clean it and get some clean water. Wet the entire area around the tape. Again, this is a damp surface technique. So let some of the paper absorb that clean water. Now I'm going to come in with that brownish yellow. I'm going to mix it up in my tray first here. Just paint right over the tape. Now if this is wet, it's going wet and wet, it's creating that transition with the yellow into the brown. And then I'll carefully peel the tape off. And I got that perfectly clean line from the edge of the tape. Now that I've got the rubber cement dry, I'll go over and make sure it's totally dry. If I paint over it and it's wet, the rubber cement's going to get into the tip of the brush and it's going to ruin the brush. So, I'll come in, I'll get my dark color. So the masking fluid, or in this case the rubber cement, really lends itself well to maintaining any color underneath. The other thing I want to do while I'm letting this dry is I want to put a little bit of rubber cement on this wash. And if I wanted to get some sort of pattern or something, I could take another different popsicle stick here and I could go into the rubber cement. And I could just put a couple little dots of rubber cement down. Of course, I have to let that dry completely. This will get thrown away. Now, over top of the dried rubber cement here, I'm just going to apply that nice dark hue. You can see anywhere that I put that rubber cement, it's not adhering. So the paper is just absorbing the pigment anywhere that there's no rubber cement and giving me that really, really cool texture. Clean my brush. Now over this, that's got to totally be dry. Make sure it's dry. It takes about 5 minutes for that rubber cement to dry. And basically the same thing's going to happen here. I'm going to put a layer of pigment over top. I'll go again with the dark color. Get a little bit of brown. And instead of using black, I'm going to use a little bit of blue into the brown to make that contrast. I'm just going to paint over. So now what happens and how this is going to differ from this one is the fact that the color that I put the fluid on top, the masking fluid on top, will stay the color. So when I rub the masking fluid off later, any design that I put underneath of the color that I'm putting on top is going to stay that color. So you end up with a similar look to what you have here and what you have here. All right. Obviously, I still need to come back and rub off the rubber cement here because it's still wet. I don't want to do it now, otherwise it's just going to smear the paint. So I have to let that dry and then rub the rubber cement off to get that finished. Damp surface technique.